Hello and welcome to the Origins of Islam. Today we want to look at cascading changes to the Quran, how one change necessitates another. And today we want to start with a slide which we have seen before. Previously we've learned how the addition of Surah 33-37, wherein marriage to the wife of an adopted son was deemed legal, necessitated a revision of Surah 4:23 in order to remove a contradiction. As a reminder, Surah 33-37 was an important building block in establishing Muhammad as the last prophet. The narrative of Muhammad as the seal of the prophet was important in order to legitimize Abbasid rule. The religion of Muhammad was their state religion, and they could not tolerate the possibility of some new wannabe prophet throwing a wrench in their gears. However, with the fact that adoptions were no longer legally recognized due to the story of Muhammad and Zaid, other verses were all of a sudden obsolete and had to be adapted. Let us therefore zoom in on Surah 4:23. This surah deals with marriage, in particular whom one is not allowed to marry. As we can see on this slide, Surah 4:23 is almost a direct copy of Leviticus 18:5-18. There are a few differences, but there's almost a one-to-one relationship. For example, in the Quran it says prohibited to you for marriage are your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, and so on. Leviticus says, you shall not uncover the nakedness of anyone near of kin, your mother, your father's wife, your sister, and so on. There is also a linguistic relationship. The kinship terms in Hebrew and Arabic are closely related. For our purposes, we want to look at one relationship in particular which does stick out. Here we see the revision in the Quranic text, which we've mentioned before. Daughters-in-law was changed to the wives of your sons who are from your loins, in order to be compatible with the newly added verse 37 in Surah 33, wherein Muhammad married his daughter-in-law. The deliberate change in Surah 4:23 was made necessary by the addition of Surah 33-37, and after looking at Leviticus we can now reconstruct how Surah 4:23 initially must have looked like. So instead of prohibited to you are the wives of your sons who are from your loins, it initially must have read something along the lines of prohibited to you are your daughters-in-law. Let us look at the term for daughter-in-law. We can see a clear relation across all Semitic languages. Only Arabic sticks out. The term is crucially different. In Hebrew the term is kala, and we have a similar term in all other Semitic languages. Only in Arabic the term is a different root, namely kana. At the same time, we still have a similar word, kalala, which means collaterals. And collaterals in this context are distant relatives. Once again, this word sticks out because in the other Semitic languages, we have no equivalent for this kalala term. And just for comparison, I've also included the sons-in-law on this slide. And what we can see here is that there's no word that sticks out. So here, Arabic follows all the other Semitic languages. So it is only daughters-in-law where we have this strange exception. Now, the word kalala occurs twice in the Quran, once in Surah 4:12 and once again in Surah 4:176. The word has initially been a mystery. The second Caliph Umar is reported to have said that he would rather know the meaning of this word than possess an amount of money equal to the poll tax levied on the fortresses of Byzantium. Eventually, the word was defined as either a man who dies leaving neither parent or child, or a person's relatives except for parents and children. In other words, collateral relatives. Now those two verses where the word occurs, Surah 4:12 and 4:176, they deal with inheritance law. Particularly verse 12 is full of grammatical and linguistic oddities and difficulties. Starting with the earliest exegetes, scholars have always struggled with these verses. The conclusion can only be that we are looking at a reinterpretation of the term for daughter-in-law. Originally adopted daughters could inherit, but with the abolition of adoption, these verses had to be changed. So coming back to our visualization, we see that Surah 4 verse 12 was changed from if a man designates a daughter-in-law or wife as heir to if a man or woman is inherited by collateral relatives. With the revision of 4:12, new problems arose. Out of a specific rule regarding women who are not part of the bloodline, i.e. wives and adopted daughters, the scribes have constructed a very broad category by replacing them with collateral relatives who are part of the bloodline. This change opens up many questions on the specifics regarding inheritance. Those questions needed answering, and hence it was necessary to add these answers to the text, which brings us to the aforementioned verse 176 in Surah 4. That is the second occurrence of the term kalala. Surah 4, 176 provides the necessary clarifications in inheritance law. We can therefore conclude that Surah 4 verse 176 was an addition made necessary by the changes to verse 12. But we are not done yet. At this point, the very existence of Said still threatens the doctrine of the finality of prophecy. Said's untimely death helped matters, but in the story he is survived by his son Usama. If Said continued to bear the name of Said ibn Muhammad at the time of his death, then the office of prophecy would have passed from Said to Usama. Usama himself had 5 sons, so the early Muslim community had to find a way to sever the filial relationship between Muhammad and Said. We've already heard that Said lost his status as the Prophet's son when Muhammad abolished adoption. This is clearly proclaimed in Surah 33 verse 40, where it states that Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. Surah 33:40 was therefore also added. This is one of the 4 occurrences of the word Muhammad in the Quran and the only one that clearly talks about the Prophet of Islam. But one loophole still remains. From the Kitab al-Masahif, we know of codices ascribed to 4 different companions, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Ibn Masud, Al-Rabi ibn Kutayam, and Ibn Abbas, which are reported to have included the following variant of Surah 33:6. Quote, "The Prophet has a stronger affinity to the believers than they do themselves. He is their father and his wives are their mothers." End quote. With Muhammad being the father of the believers, people could be led to conclude that the office of prophecy is open for all Muslims. Therefore, the Quran today reads, quote, "The Prophet has a stronger affinity to the believers than they do themselves, and his wives are their mothers." End quote. Now, even without the context of the previous readings, this verse feels like something is missing. The passage, "and his wives are their mothers," doesn't really fit, and now we know why. With the deletion of the offending phrase in 33:6, the holes have been plugged. Muhammad is now confirmed to not having left any male heir. At the same time, inconsistencies that were introduced by these interpolations have been removed. We've started with 33:37. There we've seen that Ibn Ishaq did not mention this verse, while the next generation of commentators did. By deducing the reasoning why this insertion was made, we could identify cascading changes to the Quran, which seem to be supported by linguistic peculiarities, particularly the obscure word kalala. However, this is still very much a simplified picture. I've only focused on the core changes. But for example, Surah 33 verses 36 to 40 are all later insertions. Similarly, Surah 33 verses 4 and 5 have likely also been revised, and there are potentially even more related insertions. So on this slide I've now also added those additional insertions and revisions. Now at this point we have a pretty good picture, but of course it's still only a theory. Now the question is, can we test this theory? And in the next episode, that's what we're going to do. So until then, thank you very much for watching and see you next time.